And you're in the military with summary channel. In this video, we're going to discuss the most important events that took place in the world during the previous 12 hours. We have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first, we're going to talk about Ukraine, and during the second part of the video, we will discuss the situation in the Middle East. Overnight, the Ukrainians attacked the territory of the Russian Federation using hundreds of drones. The Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation reported that yesterday, between 2 p.m. and 8 p.m., the Russians destroyed 113 drones, and most of them over the Bryansk region. So this is the Bryansk region, and as we can see, according to this report, during between the 2 p.m. and 8 p.m., Ukrainian drones were flying over this territory, and we understand that the Ukrainian drones were approaching the city of Moscow, the capital of the Russian Federation. Later, we received the report that between 8 p.m. and 11 p.m., the Russians destroyed 28 drones, this time also in the Bryansk region, and we start receiving the first updates that the Russians began destroying drones over the Moscow region, which means that the Ukrainians managed to approach the capital of the Russian Federation. And this morning, the Russians stated that overnight they destroyed 145 drones, and 53 of them were destroyed in the area of the city of Moscow. So the Ukrainians were trying to overload the Russian air defense forces, most likely with the purpose to prepare roads before the beginning of major attack with missiles, probably even, and maybe with the Flamingo missiles or something like this. So the situation, as we can see, remains very difficult. Furthermore, the pro-Ukrainian sources published lots of videos of attacks deep inside of the southern regions of the Russian Federation, and according to the media, during the previous nights, the Ukrainians managed to damage or even to destroy the Labinsk oil refinery or oil storage. So this object of energy infrastructure was damaged as a result of an overnight attack carried out by the Ukrainians. Here we can see videos from different angles. The civilians were making a video of fire and smoke over this object of energy infrastructure. And most likely in coming hours, maybe in coming days, we will receive satellite pictures and we will understand the consequences and real consequences of this attack. And this is a very interesting situation. So later, pro-Ukrainian sources published this picture where we can see the approximate routes of Ukrainian drone. As you can see, some of them were flying in the direction of Moscow, some of them were flying in the direction of the southern regions of the Russian Federation. Another important thing, as for the attack in the area of the Labinsk oil depot, this is not the first attack that was carried out by the Ukrainians since the beginning of March. I would like to remind you that 2 days ago we received a report that the Ukrainians significantly damaged the Afinsky oil refinery. And this video was published 2 days ago, and here we can see probably first seconds after the Ukrainian attack, a very heavy explosion. And a day before this attack, pro-Russian sources and pro-Ukrainian sources stated about attack in the area of Tikharetska oil storage or oil refinery. So here we can see a fresh satellite pictures where we can see that several reservoirs, at least 2 reservoirs, as we can see, were completely damaged, were completely destroyed or damaged significantly. And this video was published during right after several hours after the attack from the Ukrainian side happened. So summarizing everything, starting from the 13th of March of 2026, the Ukrainians at least damaged and destroyed 3 oil refineries, depots in the southern regions of the Russian Federation. And the Ukrainians are attacking oil refineries in this area just with one purpose: to slow down the Russian offensive that is currently taking place in the Zaporizhzhia direction. The Russians, as we discussed during the previous videos, launched a major offensive operation in the direction of the city of Orekhovo with the purpose to establish complete control over the city, and this operation will open the Russians the way further in the northwestern direction towards the city of Zaporizhzhia itself. And by the way, the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine, Alexander Syrsky, stated that the Russian Federation views the Zaporizhzhia direction as the main one. A large concentration of Russian forces and resources is being observed there. As for the previous days, we have recorded significant changes on the ground in this area. Let's discuss them once again. For example, this is the situation by the end of the 30th of March of 2026, and this is probably the moment when the Russian offensive operation began, when the major Orekhov offensive operation began. And as you can see, the beginning of the major offensive, Zaporizhzhia offensive operation, started almost at the same time with attacks on oil refineries in the southern regions of Russia. So, and this is the way how the map has been adjusted since the beginning of the 13th of March of 2026. As you can see, the Russians during these days managed to improve their position significantly. The Russians have almost encircled the villages of Vozdvizhivka and Verkhnya Tersa from the north and from the south, and the Russians approached the city of Gulyai-Polska, and currently the distance between edge positions of the armed forces of the Russian Federation and the village itself is already around 1 kilometer and 500 meters, which is already nothing. So the Russians are trying to break through these defenses, and the Russians understand that if the Russians, as a result of the first stage of this offensive operation, are able to take under complete control everything along this red line, so this means that the Orekhov-Zaporizhzhia defenses collapsed without any chances to repel upcoming attack from the northeast. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation in the Dobropolye direction. This is the second front line where the Russians are trying to break through the situation, break through the Ukrainian defenses. During the previous night, additional changes on the ground were recorded. So this is the end of the 15th of March and this is the beginning of the 16th of March. The Russians were recorded in the western part of the settlement of Grishna. In this video, we can see how Ukrainians were attacking edge positions of the armed forces of the Russian Federation in this area. And based on this video, we have colored this part of the settlement. We see that there is just one block remains under complete control of the armed forces of Ukraine. We're talking about the most northwestern one, but due to the current configuration, to the current situation and the dynamic of the situation, we believe that in coming days or maybe even hours, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation will confirm complete control over the territory. Furthermore, the Russians improved their positions in the pocket between the villages of Rodinska and Grishna. These are the changes on the ground according to different sources, and this information was provided by pro-Russian resources. According to this update, the Russians have almost encircled positions of the armed forces of Ukraine on the territory of this landfill, of this Cherikon. So according to different pro-Russian sources, this object is still under complete control of the armed forces of Ukraine. So it seems that in coming days, the battle for this part of the Dobropolye direction will be finished and the Russians will be able to move further inside of the Dnipropetrovsk region. Another important area is the Konstantinovka direction. During the previous 12 hours, additional changes on the ground were recorded in this area. If you remember 2 days ago, also somewhere around the 13th and the 14th of March of 2026, the Russians began bombing the western parts of the city of Konstantinovka using artillery, multiple launch rocket systems. It was something like an artillery preparation. And right after this artillery preparation, the Russians began advancing, and during the previous 48 hours, the Russians improved their position significantly to the west of the city of Konstantinovka. Basically, the Russians have physically cut the road of 520 between the settlements of Dovga Balka and the city of Konstantinovka itself. So now, according to this update, we understand that Russians will of course try to continue offensive operation in the southern and the southwestern parts of the city of Konstantinovka. This is a very important foothold for Russians before moving further in deeper. And now we understand that Russians have created the situation when they can attack the city, the settlement of Dovga Balka from the south and from the east. We believe that first the Russians will try to take this settlement under control because this will allow the Russians to improve their logistic. The Russians will be able to use the logistic through the villages of Stepanovka, Dovga Balka to support their contingent in the southern and the southwestern parts of the city of Konstantinovka and the Konstantinovka agglomeration. And of course, this logistic improvement will allow the Russians to improve their offensive positions. As for the territory of Ukraine, we have probably discussed almost everything. Probably another important piece of news is that this morning the Russians struck back Ukraine with a significant number of drones and missiles. We start receiving videos from different parts of Ukraine. In this video, we can see how Russians attacked the central part of the city of Kharkiv. And this morning, the Minister of Defense of Ukraine reported that overnight the Russians used 211 drones to attack the territory of Ukraine, and the Ukrainians destroyed destroyed 194. And this is a very interesting article and very interesting update, because usually the Russians attack the territory of Ukraine with approximately 100 drones a day. So we are talking about usual attacks, and around 500 drones when they carry out a massive attack. But now we see that the Russians increased they use 2 times more for a regular attack, which means that in coming days the Russians may use 600 or even 700 air vehicles to attack Ukraine during the massive and massive attack that most likely is going to take place within the next 7-8 days. Now let's discuss the situation in the Middle East, and to start this discussion, first of all, we need to talk about oil prices, because the Monday has started, and as I told you, this is something like a Black Monday, and when just during the night, overnight,